we have chosen is repairing the coloniality of our mindset on reparations. Okay? So I'll begin with this quote from African American cultural critic Bell Hooks. "We've had only a slave's idea of freedom, and to the slave, the master's way of life represents the ideal free lifestyle." And I think that's a really good quote to contextualize some of the presentation that I am going to be giving this evening. So it's going to be in 3 parts, and I'm not going to go through all the slides. People know I always have more than what I really have time to share, but I never know quite fully what I want to emphasize, despite planning. Then Oleyegege is going to speak on behalf of the outreach components of the march to give some practical contextualization to some of the things that I'm going to be talking about. And Brother Kofi is going to look at the international, and in particular the dimensions of the march and the Stop the Maangamizi campaign that we're all part of in relation to Africa and the importance of Africa to our endeavours around reparatory justice if we are to be successful. So, just as an intro bit, I think it's key to note, because when many of us think about reparations, and for many they kind of start with principles around legality, law, justice, etc. And African law, both ancient and modern, has always recognised the right to reparations. One of the earliest formulations we found in recent history, and this is not too recent, goes back to the Mandé Charter of 1222. Okay? And it talks about if a life is attacked, there is a need to repair. Basically, every life being a life, any harm caused to a life requires reparation. That's the kind of modern day translation. So this is coming from the Mandingo Empire, and to show that we had this notion of our sense of law and justice prior to us encountering Europeans, and certainly the European transatlantic traffic of enslaved Africans when we were kidnapped and taken across the world. Yeah? So I'm just beginning with that just to set a bit of context, because oftentimes our default position is around European law. Yeah? When we're looking to what is lawful, what is right, what is just. That becomes our default position. And if we are going to repair the coloniality of our mindset, we have to get back into our minds as African people. And that is really a challenge to do, because none of us are totally there for all time. It's like freedom. It's in graves. You secure certain gains, but you have to keep on renewing it. Otherwise, you lose certain examples or manifestations of that freedom, which we've seen. Now, the next slide I like to use because they're 2 banner images from the march in various years. And the first one says reparations is internal and external repair. And the second one says repair nation is reparations. Okay? So I want you to hold those 3 kind of ideas around reparations. So when I'm using the word, try not to think that I'm just talking about compensation, because I'm not. The other thing to note is, from an African perspective, reparations must also entail restoring indigenous African knowledge systems of language, spirituality and philosophy, music, art and symbolism, science and technology, resulting in Africa, and Africa, we are Africa as well. It's not just our people at home, we're the Africans abroad, redefining our own knowledge system. So a key thing here is about the knowledge that we're using, the knowledge foundations. Now this is somebody called Professor Paulo Wangula, and he is the founding Nambiana, or president of the Mpandro African Multiversity, which is a higher education research institute for the revitalization and promotion of mother tongue African scholarship. It's based near the source of the River Nile in the Bashoga Kingdom of Uganda. And he says, "We, the children of Africa, will never realize our full potential if we continue to depend wholly on the content and ways of knowledge of the European peoples. Our way forward must be linked to the recovery, replenishment and revitalization of our thousands of years old indigenous knowledge." Okay? And the next slide really speaks to the whole notion of cognitive justice. Now, there can be no true, holistic, reparatory justice for African people without global cognitive justice, okay? So what is cognitive justice? Cognitive justice really speaks to the right of multiple forms of knowledge to coexist, so that includes our African knowledges, okay, in the plural. This plurality recognises the diversity of knowledges not only as methods, but also as ways of life or liberty, and in particular emphasising the knowledge that we have created on our sojourn and throughout our whole liberation struggle as a people, which we know is not only decades old, it's centuries old. So all that knowledge that has been acquired, and if we look at, let's just take from the Haitian Revolution, because that is a real significant marker in our people's evolution and development in the diaspora in particular, the knowledge foundations of that revolutionary struggle and everything else that has come out of it. This is what we have to utilise in our struggle for reparatory justice. And just stop using the knowledge that is, if you like, given to us. And we feel that, well, this is what reparations are about because this is what other people have defined it to be. And the key kind of, I think, cases or case studies, I think the seminal one is the case of the Jewish people, the Ashkenazi Jewish people. That becomes the default standard. And when we look at the history of reparations organising, what we call the historiography, what we realise is that there are two main tendencies that we've seen ideologically, politically and culturally. The first being reparations as like a nationalistic approach to reparations. And the second one being a more, what perhaps some would call an integrationist approach. Now the first one, in terms of the most ancient forms of reparations that our people defined and thought about and organised, was about a return to our homeland. So-called repatriation. That's the oldest forms, back to African movements. Those were the oldest forms historically of reparatory justice struggle, but prior to that it was, first of all, you know, basically when our freedom and liberty was being denied us, it was our resistance to the captures and the kidnappings and so forth. That was our first act of reparation, because it was a saying, you do not have the right to deny me my liberty. You do not have the right to deny me my personality. You do not have the right to deny me my freedom of movement, which is why our people resisted. But once we had been taken away, it was about returning, okay? And the histories of the movement in North America, in the continent of Africa even, and also what we've seen here in Europe, those were the early ideas that our people were speaking about. Now, in a European context, and certainly in a North American context, I'd say from early 20th century, 1930s and beyond, there were different formulations that were added to that original one, where it was looking at a material kind of figure or reckoning around reparations and what that might be, and in particular what some of people may understand as being compensation. Now, I think from the 60s, 70s, and the 80s in particular, that's when compensation became very, very dominant. And it was because of a number of cases that had happened, not only the Jewish case, but also the cases that we were seeing in America, the internment of Japanese Americans and so forth, which influenced the thinking of many of our people who were kind of saying, well, they've got something, what about us? Okay? But remember, no holistic reparatory justice without cognitive justice. So that notion of reducing reparations, or certainly the strategic goal of reparations to being compensation, was not there in our people's thinking until very recently. Okay? So what is being advocated as reparations? And I've put here repair, because essentially that's the root of what we're talking about. Now I've got a couple of quotes here to just explain a bit of what we're saying. This one is from Professors Adjoa Ayataro and Adrienne Davis, African American professors in law. Adjoa in particular has been involved with INCOBRA, the National Coalition of Reparations for Blacks in America. Now she says, well they both say, part of the largely untold history of reparations is the struggle not only for reparations itself, however we define that, but also the struggle between distinct black classes over strategies for citizenship and the right to envision the racial future. So there are different ideas, clearly, that are permeating our people's consciousness on reparations, coming from our people. So what ideas do we listen to? So the battle of ideas within the ISMAR. The ISMAR is an acronym for the International Social Movement for African Reparations. The battle of ideas is an important ideological tool within a space where a number of ideological positions struggle for supremacy, reflective of various national, ethnic, class, and even gendered tensions within society. The ISMAR, as a revolutionary international social movement, cannot neglect the importance of winning hearts and minds and mobilizing our communities and the rest of society around a common reparatory justice vision that presents a credible political, social, and economic narrative around which the movement seeks to transform hearts and minds to support, which is in itself an alternative to that of the dominant white supremacy racist, sexist, and capitalist class. So clearly, what we're seeing with all these different ideas and groups and leaders and spokespersons and organisational platforms and agendas is that battle of ideas. Our people literally, although many are pro-reparations, having different ideas around what that repair will look like, what we should be focusing on, and so forth. So I want to just take a minute to just ask you, a couple of you, what are your own ideas about the goals of our reparations struggle? What do you think are the main goals of this movement? Because every movement has goals. We're not just doing this aimlessly. Anyone want to offer some ideas? Right at the back.
For me, it has always been the reconstitution of the African person, because we're in pieces, like a rule of fable of genetic, we are in pieces, and we need to get ourselves together. It's not about what somebody else does, it's about how we pull ourselves back together.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to offer another view? Or to build on what's been said? Any other ideas around the goals of reparations? Yes, sir.
Total recovery of our African personality, nation, and sense of equality and well-being in the world.
Okay. So these views, what you've just heard, these two views, are they the standard ideas and narratives when you think our people are talking about reparations, or when it's being reported in the media, or when so-called scholars are writing books and doing research? Do you think, are these the ideas that are the dominant ideas that we're hearing? No. What are the ideas that we're hearing?
I think I like the theme, nothing about us without us, because it's about inclusion, and not only inclusion of each person, but inclusion of the ideas so that we build a better understanding of those ideas. I think a lot of the times when I hear talk of reparations, what I hear is talk of money.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I'm going to move on, because I see Kofi's at the back there, and I want to make sure that we have enough time to hear from our other two speakers who are going to share some perspectives with you too. So this is a quote. It was actually included in the synopsis that was sent out to promote today from Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, and this was reported in the Barbados Advocate, apparently on the 12th of July. He says, reparations is ultimately a government-to-government conversation. It is about how governments talk to each other, how governments sit down and work out strategies to resolve issues of this nature. Now, I don't have the quote up there, but I want to read you another quote from the same Sir Hilary Beckles, and this is from a conference that took place in Edinburgh, and it was in 2015, Repairing the Past, Imagining the Future, Reparations and Beyond, and he gave a keynote lecture, and he was actually asked a question by Brother Delani, who is part of the African Emancipation Day Reparations March Committee, like myself and Oneye Gege, around who leads, if you like, the reparations movement. And the reason why he was asked that question is because Professor Vereen Shepherd, who had given a keynote address at the same conference, similarly when challenged from another member of the March Committee, Prophet Kwaku, more or less said that the governments were in the lead, you know, that the CARICOM governments were leading the movement. So, of course, that view was challenged, and it was asked of Professor Beckles. And his quote, which is different to the one that we're hearing that he's saying now, but I think it's important that you hear it, he said, and the gentleman who spoke about the CARICOM Reparations Commission, let me say this. It's a government commission. Notwithstanding the fact that many others are on it, we have all different types of people on this commission. All different types of people. Grassroots people, academics, NGO people, all kinds of people are on the commission. But it is a government commission, and we are aware of its limits. I do not believe that the CARICOM Reparations Commission is at the heart of the struggle. It is not at the heart of this struggle. It is just an element of many other elements in the struggle, and I will not be part of any rationale that says the CARICOM Reparations Commission is in the vanguard of the reparations movement. It is not. It is just a strategy developed at a moment in time to move the conversation along a little. But it is not the heart of this struggle and can never be. It's a civil society struggle. The Commission is just an instrument moving it from A to B, hoping that it adds value. But believe me, it is not at the centre. So yes, it has advantages, and the criticisms of it are real and legitimate. From time to time, the Prime Ministers remind us that we cannot step outside the crease. We are a government commission, they remind us of that. So believe me, there's a tension there. So the critique, I'm happy to hear it, because I'm thankful we have the civil society movement going, and if we think for a moment, if we think for a moment that the CARICOM Government Commission is going to hold this together, it cannot. It is just an instrument in the many other elements in the process. Thank you. So that was his answer to the question. So you can see the difference with what's being said now. I'm going to skip that one because I'm now going to share with you some of the political goals of Pan-African reparations for global justice as articulated and kind of put together by PARCO, the Pan-African Reparations Coalition in Europe, that I'm also part of, and supported by the Global African People's Parliament. The first being, now these are the strategic goals of our struggle for reparations as African people. The first being to learn about, recognise and stop the Ma'angamizi, which is basically the African Holocaust, including the horrors of enslavement, colonisation, neo-colonisation, recolonisation and other imperialist and foreign impositions on Africans at home and abroad, including forced Europeanisation and Arabisation. The second being to counter Afrophobia as a manifestation of white supremacy, eradicating African dehumanization, and the assertion or reassertion of the African personality. The third being to restore sovereignty by redressing with Ma'at Ubuntu Manla, which is basically a Pan-African government of people's power, and that's not the African Union. So when I say that, think African Union, but what it isn't and what it should be. To repair the disrepair in our power and usher in a fundamental change of the existing world order that would definitively bring about new geopolitical realities, such as Ma'at Ubuntu Man, the anti-imperialist sovereign Pan-African Union of communities, of peoples and polity of African people's power. And in the synopsis, it also explained Ma'at Ubuntu Man, basically an African state, which in Okan is Oman, based on the African value systems of Ma'at and Ubuntu. That's essentially what it means. So clearly, we're far away from that with the African Union. Far, far away from that, when 70% of its funding comes from non-Africans, yeah? We know it's not our instrument, it's not the instrument of our peoples. And this is just an interloper quote from Osajifo, Kwame Nkrumah: Pan-Africa and not Euro-Africa should be our watchword and the guide to our policies, writing in 1963. So the idea of Ma'at Ubuntu Man is an evolution, because all our leaders have been pointing towards this direction. PARCO didn't create these ideas. We're simply synthesizing and harmonizing and building on what we know to be the intergenerational knowledge foundation that our people have created. And essentially what it looks like, we haven't got a proper visual as yet, but it's an Africa without borders for us. And that is not just the continent, it includes Africa's diaspora. Yeah, that have been scattered across the four corners of the earth. Now this might sound, I mean, many of you would have seen the film Black Panther, I'm assuming, and I know there's critical debates around that film, but many people did see it in a positive light in relation to this notion of a Wakanda, okay? So Wakanda is a fictional kind of super African nation, but Ma'at Ubuntu Man is already being worked on, it's not fictional. So the next bit here, what we have is Vazoba, Forum of African Friends Networking Open Forum, basically. And Vazoba are working in Ghana, in particular, with a newly formed body called GAFRIC, the Global African Family Reunion International Council, who are, if you like, developing this notion in Africa of what we call liberated zones, which are free kind of territories that we're trying to develop that are Pan-African kind of, what they call Sankofa homes. They're essentially homes in Africa where we Sankofa. We take the best of our past, our culture, our values, in order to guide us into the future. And so what we have here are two of the chiefs who are promoting this. in particular Nana Nketiah V. And Kofi, remind me please of the second one, the pronunciation? Right. Okay, I hope you heard that. So Kofi will say more about that. Now I'm still going on, I'm still talking about the goals of our reparations struggle. The fourth one, because there's 7 in total, being systemic change globally to ensure the expropriation and redistribution of ill-gotten wealth, resources and income worldwide. So for those who are, the compensation in terms of the actual material wealth, that would come under that heading, all right? The fifth one being to implement new paradigms of development, including a new legal, political and international economic order, because it has to be, if it's going to be truly reparatory, it can't be just like black capitalism. We just put black people there. And we just try and run the system better than the Europeans and the Chinese and whoever else are kind of colonizing us. The sixth one being to institutionalize Ma'at and Ubuntu in terms of global justice for all. So it's a value system when our values can permeate literally every aspect of our endeavors as human beings and how we interface with the environment and with the cosmos as well. And the last one being to enforce the environmental elements of global justice, and that's in particular challenging the ecological destruction, the ecocide that is affecting us and also resulting in many genocides or what's called omnicides. And this is by implementing full respect for the notion of what's called Mother Earth rights, and there's a particular Afrikan formulation of Nana Asase Yat rights, which means Mother Earth, yeah? So Bolivia, Ecuador in particular have been championing a charter for the rights of Mother Earth, which is about how the indigenous peoples of the world have always lived in harmony. It's not about extracting all the minerals, everything, mining to death, which is helping to create some of the ecological destruction, rapid climate change that we're seeing in the Caribbean and Africa in particular. So those are the strategic goals of our reparations struggle. I now want to just come on to say a few words about the march in particular and how this all connects together. So you're going to see me skip some slides, but don't worry about that. So coming on to the march and what's its relevance in particular, when we think about the march, many people just see this as a London thing or a UK thing. We know that the march started in 2014 under the auspices of the Rastafari Movement UK. From 2015 until now, which will be 4 years, the march has been developed and evolved by the African Emancipation Day Reparations March Committee, which, by the way, still does have members who were involved with Rastafari Movement UK. It's important for me to state that, so that people can see a certain degree of continuity and building on from what has started, because all of our people have contributed to get us to where we are at now. And I begin just talking for a few minutes before I invite Odeye Gege to speak, but with this banner that we march at the front of the march, the Haitian banner that was obtained via Brother Mario at the back there. And it says on it, reparations by our own people's power, liberty or death. It has it in Creole. But we marched for the last, I think, 2 years in particular. We decided we would march under this banner in recognition of the role of Haiti in our historic and our contemporary, not only freedom struggle, but, in terms of reparatory justice, because all roads have been leading to reparatory justice, in effect, in terms of previous generations' efforts. So the march aims, I'm not going to spend any time on that because you've got flyers or you would have seen them, but the key thing is that when we march, we're not marching, and this comes up a lot and Oleyegege will kind of add on that. But, you know, we end up getting to this thing about why are we marching? It's a waste of time. We're not achieving anything. And people are failing to actually read the publicity material. They're failing to look at the websites, the information that we put out. It is just one day in the calendar. But it is a day of our show of strength and our unity. It is a day when our people come out to show their solidarity and unity with others. Even though we've got different ideas. You know, you'll have amongst the marchers people with varying ideas and objectives in terms of reparatory justice. But one thing that I like to think most of us who come on that march are united on is that we're pro-reparations. Yes. Okay? Yeah. So the march, we developed specific aims after year one, because in year one there was no aims. Okay? People were just marching. Sure. So, me getting all, we didn't have specific aims. And so when you're trying to sustain a movement and to build it and to harness that ingenuity and that energy that people have, you begin to get challenged. Well, why are we doing this? That was the challenge that we were getting even in year one. And you need to think about, how are we going to hold this together? How are we going to use this as a vehicle to build and strengthen our movement, which is the ISMA, the International Social Movement for African Reparations. So we came up with these 5 aims, which are really key. The first being to draw attention to African people's global determination to not let the British state and other perpetrators get away with the crimes of the Maangamizi. The second being to raise consciousness about the fact that all of the attacks upon us in both individual and collective instances amount to genocide and ecocide, necessitating reparations. And that's about us in the here and now. That's not just about our foreparents and what they are entitled to, even through us, okay? The third being to increase awareness of the necessity to stop the Maangamizi and its current manifestations, such as austerity, attempts to recolonize Africa, menticide, and deaths in police, psychiatric, and prison custody. Those are not all the manifestations. In the Stop the Maangamizi, We Challenge Genocide, Ecocide petition that gets handed in and was named that in 2015, it talks about 12 key manifestations of ecocide and genocide of our people. And so really what we're talking about is this era of neo-colonial enslavement, neo-colonialism. So previous freedom fighters were not thinking, well, just because we had the chains off, that would be sufficient. No, it was about ending the system of chattel enslavement as we knew it then. During the so-called colonial era, colonialism, people knew that the strategic goal had to be get rid of colonialism. Not how can we accommodate ourselves within it, although we did, and many of our people did, which is why we've still got these class tensions amongst us. So now we're in the phase of neo-colonialism. A strategic must be to end that. Yeah, the system, it's the system. And so that strategic goal is often missing from many of our reparations groups and organisers who don't actually cite these things. So no matter what we're doing, we're very busy doing activities, but is it propping up the system, or is it about tearing it down and rebuilding a new system that can work for all of us? And if people think, oh, well, that's too big, well, that's what previous generations knew they had to do. And they did things to a degree. Yeah, expecting that we would take things forward, not capitulate and actually resign ourselves to basically, well, we can't change things because the powers that be are too globalized. Fourth one, to demonstrate African people's strength, capacity and determination to speak to and challenge establishment power with our growing grassroots power to effect and secure reparations on our own terms. Very important. We decide what is the repair, what is the nature of the harm, how we decide, how we define it to the world, and what we say is the solution. Our people, not just individuals or ones and ones, because when many of us speak, We speak about, well, I think it should be this. Well, who are you in your family lineage? What about the rest of your people? Have you consulted your family? Have you gone through your history to see what your foreparents went through, what our ancestors went through? We've become too individualistic. Yeah, this is a people struggle. Last one, to showcase African people's grassroots initiatives for reparations. That's about the agendas that people are working on that is reparatory, or what is aimed to be reparatory, okay? It's important that we showcase the fact that we are the ones who are going to find the solutions, or we have the solutions. It's not coming from others outside of our group, yeah? And that puts the focus very much on us. Because when that day comes, when we have got a certain degree of unification around our agenda, and we can compel others to do what we need them to do, yeah, then we have to know what it is we're putting in place. We can't sit and wait and say, oh, give us free education, give us this, give us that, which is what we've really been hearing, yeah? And some elements, even I have to say, of the 10-point plan, CARICOM 10-point plan, are about that. Because they're saying, Britain, Europe, come and help us clean up the mess. What? Scholarships to Oxford, Cambridge, there's been deals around that. Is that cleaning up these are mental-sidal institutions that are perpetrators of epistemicide. Yeah, you succeed in this system by denouncing who we truly are.
True.
Yeah, when our children say, but hang on a minute, and they speak up because of the knowledge that they know they're even getting in the home, they're penalised.
Yeah.
So many tell their children, I know, but you just got to get the paper, you know, all right, don't try not to get into yeah? We're experiencing that a lot with our children who are not taking it. They're like in the 70s in Azania when our young were saying, no, we don't want this Bantu education. Okay? It's a quote from Brother Kofi. The march visually displays a freedom-fighting unity of African people from all over the world on the streets of London, rallying together as one defiant family inside the belly of the beast. That is no longer happening in African protests in any other part of the world, including those on the continent of Africa. I am an African born and bred in Ghana, and I know what the power of this image meaningfully conveys to Africans at home and all other peoples across the world. And there are two images there of the Oga Ferrero Genocide Foundation delegation that joined us last year from Namibia, and Brother Dale Mpofu from the Economic Freedom Fighters of Azania. So what you see on the march, you see it is a mechanism where we're bringing together liberation movements, freedom fighters, as well as bourgeois people who just think reparations is just watching a program or a few YouTube videos. They're all on the march together. It is a manifestation of our movement and everyone that's in it. The march has 9 blocks. It's important to note this is some of the structure, the development that people are not seeing, which is clear that there's thinking going on. We're a thinking and a learning movement. We're an action learning movement. The blocks are ways of their constituencies of holding together affinity groups and large masses of our people, because thousands turn out. And between the annual marches, we've been trying to encourage people to keep the blocks going, do your own activities. So we've got a Revered Ancestors block, a community block, Global African Family, a repatriation block, interfaith block, students block, trade unionists, artists, non-African allies. And we have African terms that speak to those ideas, because all the way through we're promoting this is an African march. African ideas, African conceptualization, African ways of seeing. Every year, certainly for the last 3 years, we have the Sankofa Pan-African libation ceremony that takes place in Ghana. Vazoba, who I showed you on the earlier side with Grafric, they deal with that. So this happens in solidarity, organising with us, and there's been various other marches and other activities in other countries and in Caribbean countries throughout the years. At the march, as you know, we hand in the Stop the Mangamizi petition. This is just a picture of 2 years of our delegation. It's headed by our two distinguished elders, Mama Lindiwe, who is right here, and we're so honoured to have her, because again, representing lineages of struggle, the intergenerationality of our movement, yeah, and respecting the path that these elders have laid for us, as well as Prophet Kwame from the Bobo Shantis. They hand in the petition, they head our delegation each year. Some other pictures which I won't really spend too much time on. The key thing to note is that at the march as well in Parliament Square, when we get there, there was this thing that was coming up around, well, why are we marching? They're shut, blah, blah, blah. So we said, well, their parliament's shut, but we're a people, we reclaim the power to define for ourselves. We have our own parliamentary session. Who's to say that parliament is there? I know they say it's the mother of all parliaments, but all the time, what we're doing is we're getting our people to reclaim space, territory, sovereignty of our imagination, first and foremost, yeah, which is a necessary part of waking a people up, helping them emancipate themselves so that they can take higher degrees of action. As you all know, we handed this petition, which, by the way, the origins of it go back to 1951. The We Charge Genocide petition, that's why we called it, Stop the Mangamizi, We Charge Genocide. It was building on that legacy. Again, Africans in America in 1951 who sued the trying to bring the American government before the United Nations for crimes of genocide against African people in America. So the petition builds on that, yeah, in modern times. So it is truly Pan-African, because it's not only what we added here in the UK, all right? And every year we hand it in. It's only the last 2 years we've been getting a response from number 10 properly. And this year, for the first time, we got a response from the Foreign and Commonwealth Minister, Lord Ahmed. And basically, he told us the same thing he told CARICOM nation states. We do not believe reparations are the answer. They said a lot more, but I haven't got time to say that. So what we are demonstrating is that we are a force. We're not governments in terms of existing African or Caribbean governments, but we are asserting the fact that we are a stakeholder in this movement. And no, you're not going to just go and talk to African and Caribbean governments. You talk to us first. Because we're the link to those governments. We're the link to not the governments, but our people on the ground. And we know the failures of these neo-colonial Bantustans. Yeah? So that's really important, that our people see themselves as the agents and drivers of this change. Yeah? Don't get me wrong, the states have a role, but it must be to support the people's struggle, not to subordinate the people's struggle to the dictates of these states that will never work for us. Never. I mean, when you have Queen Elizabeth II as head of state, head of Commonwealth, Prince Charlie, I mean, what are we saying? What are we doing? Where is our mind at? Whose mind are we thinking with? Certainly not an African mind. Certainly not a mind that wants to reclaim sovereignty. Yeah? And that's what our movement has to be about. We also, part of the campaign is about saying we need to shut down these Mangamizi crime scenes. These are crime scenes. Parliament is a crime scene in itself, because it was in that Parliament that they legislated that evil act that compensated the enslavers. That's a crime scene. So we're getting our people to now define what is law, what is criminality, by whose standard? Crimes against our people. Crime scenes are the mines, the industries, the fact that they're still extracting the hell out of Africa. That's what they're doing. Yeah?
And the Bank of England.
All of them. These are crime scenes.
Barclays Bank.
Crime scenes.
Lloyds Bank.
Right.
The Bank of England.
So many of our people want to take higher forms of action. They're engaged in liberation struggle, basically. in Africa in particular, and in Abya Yala, so-called South America. Many of our people are being killed for trying to just defend ancestral lands that they have settled on. Yeah? Many in the UK they're too bourgeois. They don't want to come out and sign a petition. They just sit behind the computer or in a WhatsApp group and make lots of noise. But what are we prepared to sacrifice for this freedom? Yeah?
Yes.
And then finally, the theme for the march this year. Every year we have a theme. The March Committee has a motto: education is preparation for reparations. We're saying to our people, educate yourself about reparations. Wherever you start on the journey is okay. It's important that you start the journey, but you can't stay there. Yeah? When I first began, I had a particular understanding of reparations, and then I developed a better understanding through activism. And that's what we're saying to our people to do. Get active, do something. Because the more you're involved in it, is the more you realise what you thought was the destination, it isn't. You've got to go a bit further. Yeah? We were inspired by many things. You heard the intro video. But one, very much so, this is showing the borrowing of ideas. This is the Ovo Herero flag that they use. It cannot be about us without us. Anything about us is against us. And that is a strong message they're sending to the Namibian government, who are trying to shut them out of negotiations around the genocide and redress for that. So that's why this year we have the theme, nothing about us without us, borrowing from that. But it's speaking to multiple publics at the same time. It's speaking to the government here, whether it's the Corbyn government in waiting with their slavery educational trust, whether it's the CARICOM governments who think that we don't matter and that they speak for the 15 million people in the region, not realising that there's more than that outside who can claim legitimate citizenship even to those Caribbean countries. Yeah? We're speaking to everyone who just thinks that they can speak for us without, I mean the people. Yes. When I speak about us, I mean the people, the masses. Yeah? And the second part, very key, actualising the reparatory justice change we envision. We have to be the drivers of the change. So that is an action word to our people. Yeah? Get your sovereign mind on the road. Yeah? You have to lift yourself up. So that emancipatory aspect, and even in the Collins English Dictionary, when you look at the definition of reparations, the old ones talk about reparations must result in the transformation of the group, basically, who've been affected by whatever, enslavement, colonization, genocide, whatever, war crimes, the transformation. We must be a different people at the middle or end, because the end we can't see fully. What that final Pan-Africa, Ma'ato-Buntuman, will look like, we don't have all the answers yet, because it's in making that happen that we will realise better what we need to do. Yeah? And that's ensuring we have that creativity. And I guess I will stop there. But the key thing for me to emphasise is in terms of what would we have to be doing? Because although we recognise lots of people are working on reparations in different ways in terms of their organisations, their movements, just themselves personally, a lot of us, unless we are working to that strategic goal of re-establishing our sovereignty, our nation state, it's also material, it's not just the cultural and the spiritual. That is, the foundation of it. But it is material, because ultimately our people want to see betterment in their lifetime, not only for them, but for their children, their children's children, for our posterity. That's what people want. That's a basic human need. So, as Cabral talked about, this is not about ideas in a head. It's about how we can make our ideas a tangible, material force to transform, to stop the Maangamizi in its current phase of neo-colonialism, and to transform ourselves as a group in the process. Yeah? So our efforts must link up to these strategic goals. Just like for a Palestinian, wherever they are in the world, they know that they are fighting for a homeland. They know that they are an oppressed people. And they never forget that. So if they're doing their little charities, it's ending up, how is it serving the ends of Palestine? A reclaimed Palestine. But what are we doing? We're in these silos and regions and think that we can do it all just as some black people in Britain or some little people in the islands in the Caribbean that, you know, with the way the climate's going, they predicted won't be there maybe in 100 years. So where are we going? What is our future? I'll hand over to you now.
Oh, well, that's what you're carrying in terms of the... I'm going to speak on the outreach work that we're doing as part of the African Emancipation Day Reparation and Stop the Hunger Music campaign. And what people don't read and also people don't listen, you know, and there's a lot of information for us to learn right now. And in terms of, I'm just going to reflect on the process of going out into our communities, and engaging with our people and some of the struggles that we might face or we have faced, you know, as... Thank you. Perfect. And if, can I stand? Is that all right?
Yeah.
I feel better to stand.
Brilliant.
And I can see you, you can see me. This is what we're pushing the reparations campaign, the African Emancipation campaign. And what Esther's saying, as you're hearing, if you meet somebody out on the road, it's hard to debate all those issues at, you know, at one given time. But we are actually trying to engage people, as Esther's saying, to want to seek more knowledge, to want to learn more, as it says on the leaflet, education and preparation for reparations. So as we say, we don't have all the answers, and we might not know all the issues, you know, ourselves at that given time. I'm saying as activists out there, as reparation activists out there, we're learning at the same time. But in saying that, what we do push, I'm saying, as I say to people in the team, I say, and as it's been said to me, always speak about reparations from your standpoint, from how you understand it, how the Mahangumese is affecting you. Because that way, you know, no one can trip you up on it, in a way, because you're speaking your own truth, your own experience. And it's to just identify, really. There's two things of identifying where the Mahangumese is affecting you and affecting us in terms of gaining reparations, yeah? And also how it's affecting us in not actually seeing what we need to do in terms of repairing ourselves. So when we're out there, I'm not speaking as, you know, what we do out on the road, you know, in the cold calling with people that haven't come to an event for a specific reason. We're just out there at the tube station or out there in the park. We're meeting the public at all varying degrees, you know, all different stages of the mental capacity. We don't know who we might meet. And stories that we're hearing from some of the regional activists, shall we say, campaigners, is the hostility. There's one sister talking about the deep hostility that she received from another sister. In this, I'll refer to what Chinwezi says. The piece I read, and at the beginning of this conference, he was saying, we're all going to be vexed. Yeah, we're all going to be vexed. So we have to understand that we're going to meet, you know, we're going to meet that type of resistance from people, and we need to, you know, look at our people as, and this is how I survive, as that they themselves are a product of the Mahangumese. They themselves are affected by the Mahangumese. Maybe they don't know it, maybe they know it. But it means, as I say again, when we're actually engaging with our people and trying to put the message across, as I say again, we have to be brain surgeons, because you're actually dealing with the mind, you're dealing with, you know, people. So you can't go in there again, into the mind, you know, with a club hammer and a pitchfork sort of thing. It doesn't work. We have to be very sensitive, very gentle with ourselves. As much as we're eat and we want to do this, you know, then it has to be done. But at the same time, you can't burn yourselves out. You know, that's another point. I'm speaking in terms of activism and what we may say to the ones going out and seeking the signatures, all right? So those campaigners, we say to them, as I said, there's a lot of issues, there's stuff that you may not know, but at the same time, what you do know is that we're talking about a great harm that has happened in the globe, and we need to repair it. I met an elder today who does steel pans, the brother I was speaking about, doing the steel pans, and I showed him the other leaflet, what you have in your hands there, the new one, what we're doing for the day. And he said to me, he says, I said, yeah, it's reparations. Because I'm under the assumption that everybody knows reparations, isn't it, you know? And he said, no, you shouldn't say it, enough you say that. And I said to him, reparations is about repair, that's what it means, so I'm explaining the word to him. And he just looked at me and he said, if you say repair, if you just say repair, you know, on it. But I understand what he's saying. But at the end of the day, I still understand that we can't keep dumbing our people down. Our people do learn. And it seems like as soon as we see a complaint about, well, what that word said, you know, all right, it's a bit difficult. Same with your children. They may find it difficult. You stay with them. You keep them on it. Some people, you know, just want to shut down. And I'm telling them, no, you cannot shut down. You need to actually be awake. You need to actually be alive. You have to be interested in this. Reparations is about repair. I'm going to go a little bit. Reparations is about the repair. And I think that's my heart and soul, you know, drive. And my other heart and soul and drive within this, of which I've learned with my Ubuntu, is that, you know, I say again, we didn't get into this condition by ourselves. We didn't. Nobody, we didn't just wake up and say, oh, listen, hey, Mr. White Man, come and stay here, please, please. You know, we never done that. You know, we didn't do that by ourselves. And if we are talking about the repair, and we know who caused some of that harm, in terms of going through that process, because really and truly, it's like a mass, like counselling, you know, that we're really going through on the globe. The Under Music campaign is really bringing that to people, getting them to open up and look into who and what we really are. So, in terms of what I'm also saying to people is, when I push it to people, I say the repair, you know, is about the healing, and it's not about bunning Babylon down, you know, because this is a process. You can bun Babylon down after we've attempted this process, please, you know, after we've given all our children a fair chance, you know, after we've given people the chance to show redress. They may not be, as we assume, listening, but I'm sure that they are listening, but what they're listening for is how mobilized we are, how organized we are, when we're really going to get it together, when we're really on, you know, a page together on a particular time. And that's what I think they really fear. So, you know, that's my heart and soul of it, is about peace. I'll explain something again. I've spoken with a brother, Haru, you might know him, Brother Haru speaks on the Commission knowledge. And he said to me, like, the non-self and the self, this is what he speaks on. And we were talking about I told him about a reading I had, and he said to me, well, you've had a Ma'at Hirakuti reading. So that means it's justice. It's, you know, justice. You have to stay on justice. If you come off it, bro, you know, it's going to keep slapping you up. And I kind of understand what he was saying, because I know in this world, we ourselves can be very unjust as a people, right? And I mean this. I'm not saying that we should roll over and say to the white man, you know, we're just going to work with your son. We're not saying that. And as our sister said, this is from the ground up, it will be led by us. So I'm trying to take away people's fear of white people. Because you have a fear of white people if you can't sit around the table with white people and talk with white people about what they have done to you. If you can't do that, what are you doing for your children? Because your children are every day in school, out in society with white people and other people. I'm going to just show you about what the activism really does for me in terms of doing this work is because it allows me to be honest with people. I'm not going to go out there and say, you know, sign my petition, I don't care who you are, just sign it. No, what I'm actually asking people to sign is something very serious. If I'm asking you to sign it, whether you're white, whether you're black, you know, blue, I want you to understand, you know, that we want you to sign this because we want you to be a part of the process of repairing the planet. Yes? If our children, if we think about Wakanda, there's that one part in Wakanda where the white guy ends up there and she's like, oh, colonialist, you know, but where is he? He's in the engine room, in the science room with them, where all the stuff is going on. But she hasn't got any fear of him. She says, I know you, because we know about you. Look how long we've known about them. Why is it that we still keep pushing the same narrative? They're going to do this, they're going to do that. And it's not being proven. Because you and I have not really gotten into any of those positions where we start affecting, I mean really affecting those things with some white people. You haven't proven yet. I know people are working, but they've not. I don't agree with that narrative, and I will tell you why. Because out there when you speak to people and you hear white people saying, what is it about? Oh, really? Yeah, you know, it's about reparations. Oh, is it the Windrush? Oh, you know? Believe me, it's like to say they don't need a long pitch, right? They don't need a long pitch unless you've got a political-minded one. Well, what type of reparations? For who? You know, and for when? And who's asking for it? You know, and then you have to go into all of that kind of stuff, because they know stuff, right? But the general man and woman, in a sense, out there, right, we're dealing with heart and flesh and soul. If you look at somebody, if they ain't got no heart, or they ain't got no flesh or no soul, you understand? You're going to get a dead reaction from somebody, or you won't see the real reaction from them. I'm telling you. I'm not trying to appease white people or colonialism at all. I'm trying to say that we're in a day now where you look where our children are, they're the ones who's going to be educating Europeans. They need to be educating Europeans. So, that's me, that's my drive, in a way, in terms of the campaign. And I know how difficult it is for me, because people may be thinking all sorts of things about me, or about what we're actually doing, because we're engaging with Europeans. That's why the NSR is so important, in terms of the academics, you know, and the activists working together, because really truly, separation, divide and rule has been the only thing that keeps racism, white supremacy in place.
Yeah.
Right? It's the only thing. And as Dr. Neely Fuller says, you know, how do you replace a system of racism, white supremacy? What do you replace it with? And he said you replace it with a system of justice. Simple. You replace it with a system of justice. Yeah? We keep re-traumatizing ourselves in a certain way. And I've seen that. Let me just, this is what I read, right? Because I know I can go up on a tangent, so it's good to write things. It's right here, campaigning for Stop the Mangamizi We Charge Genocide, Ecocide campaign is very much about learning about the multiplicities of our repairs, i.e. political, social, cultural and personal. I'm just giving some examples from myself. This is clear when cold calling. And I say, like, you don't know the person you're meeting, whether they're black or white. You've got to quickly juggle in your head, you know, where they're coming from. How shall I pitch it? Yeah? And usually they will give you some indication, right? So that's a key thing that I would say to people, to be aware of where people are coming from and what they may even want, right? And especially when cold calling outside the tube station, on the high street, or in the community, yeah? We have to be aware. Obviously, if I went to a very focused group, you know, aware of what this is about, then it may not be as difficult. If I went to a church, you know, from a nightclub, it's going to be a bit different again in how I pitch it, how I speak to people, how I engage them. Because I always have to start from the point where they're at. Yes. Yeah? That's what I'm saying. Location, again, we're campaigning and we're thinking about constituencies and we're thinking about areas, you know, to get to. Most people are happy in their own area, their own locale. People they know, regular. When we are doing the outreach, we want to get to more people, as many different peoples as possible, which requires a different type of language. You know, sometimes you have to go a little bit street, you know, if adapt, you know, to engage the person. Sometimes you have to talk, you know what I'm saying, differently. This is all I'm putting across to the advocates and to those that are going out to do the work, is to remind them of these things, because you want to win people, right? We're winning hearts and souls as a, you know, a tenant, to win them. If you can win them on the spot right there for the signature, you know, they may go away and forget it, you know, but it's a signature that we're actually looking at the same time, and to impart some good information and some good knowledge. The people we engage with will be influenced and conditioned by a variety of social conditions and cultural backgrounds, and I've said this with various expectations and methods in seeking redress. People seek redress in their own way. They don't want to hear reparations, some people. Some people stay away from white people. I'll bun the whole thing down. Yeah? I'm just looking at the negative sides in a way. You know? That's the resistance. Because when we're saying no, we actually want to talk to the governments. Yeah? And I know why I'm saying that in terms of phase one. Because when this phase is over, you know, it's something else. If we're talking freedom or death, then where do you go after then? Yeah? I mean, those who know. So, you know, for the future of the planet and ourselves, it's important for us to do our best to effect this, because after that, if the government knows that this is what we're doing as freedom fighters, you're not locking me up as some normal criminal. I'm sorry, it don't work like that. You know, I'm a freedom fighter, bro. You know what I'm saying? You know, I'm a political prisoner now. You understand? And that's the realm we should be in, rather than to be just criminalised, you know, for standing up for ourselves. So we say people to understand what the campaign is about, to be a part of a political process, be a part of a body, you know, that you can, it will protect you. There's certain protection within that. Sorry, I'm going a bit. If any at all. Some people have ways of seeking redress and some just don't care. They have none. They try and just block you for the sake of blocking you. Yeah? This is where having an awareness of all the issues and arguments are important, or some to help, so that they can be identified with manifestations of the Ma'angamizi. A lot of people I see, I keep saying, you're a walking Ma'angamizi crime scene in yourself, by yourself. You are the crime scene, because you are perpetuating some of the most damaging ways, you know, the Afrophobia. You know, and that's where we're saying, you know, when we're saying money in ourselves, you know, in our community and stuff like that, that's part of the Ma'angamizi crime scene. How comes it ain't circulating? How comes we ain't doing well? You know, how comes we're not upscaling ourselves? How comes our voices ain't becoming louder, stronger, more supportive? You know, so we ourselves can be Ma'angamizi crime scenes, you know, and when you see those ones, you don't spend too much time, yeah, you don't move on to the next person, because, you know, you need to work with who's, you know, workable in a way. Engaging individuals in supporting the Stop the Ma'angamizi campaign is dependent on, as I'm repeating myself again, on what you know. And I put here as an expert, right? Because it's quite true, you have to be the expert right now. This, in a sense, is new information to me. Yeah? The Ma'angamizi, you know, the work that has been done by, you know, yourself and others, it's quite new information, it's fresh, and it's refreshing. Because it allows me now to say to everybody, you know, what are you fighting for? Oh, I'm fighting to free ganja. Okay. What are you fighting for? Oh, I'm fighting for deaths in custody. Okay. And what are you fighting for? I'm fighting to fix a family. Yeah? Well, okay, you know, put it under the umbrella. Because that's what's missing. Everybody is sort of in the piece and the corner. And they don't understand that the Ma'angamizi, as a phenomenon in a way on the planet that should never have happened or should never occur, has affected all of us. And we must remember that, you know, all that we are under is part of that, you know, that crime, that ongoing Holocaust, as we say, you know, as a Ma'angamizi. And also, the other side of that is to get people to recognise where you are doing something to support, you know, stopping the Ma'angamizi. Because a lot of it, I'm just doing it in my group. It's, you know, I don't care about that, my anger, you know, and all this. They don't, you must claim it, yeah? We must claim that. That's what I'm trying to say to people. Claim the Ma'angamizi in terms of you working to end it, you know, all right, and identifying where it's affecting us. All right, I'm gonna move on, quickly, fellow brother, right? Learning reflections, all right, I was saying, and knowledge production again. It's about, at the same time when we're out there, we are dealing with knowledge production. We are talking and engaging with people, you know, getting them to understand what's going on, getting them to find ways of arguing it for themselves. So not only we're producing knowledge, so, you know, passing it on. Yeah? At Brockwell Park was interesting, right? Compared to Lewisham at the People's Day. Two very different experiences in terms of people, demographics and so forth. A lot of our people at, you know, Lewisham, People's Day, Brockwell, holy boy, people, lots. I mean, thousands, myriads, you know? And serious, no, but they were signing a petition, right? Real talk. You know, some of those, like, you know, fair enough, but generally they were signing. And I'll tell you how they're observant too. And you have to check it, because they will try and embarrass you at the same time, and you won't even know it, right? They will see me say to a black person, please sign it, and walking away. And they'll see this, my family member say no. And they're like, oh, I'll sign it, and they'll say it loud. Oh, I'll sign it, yeah, get over here, mate. Because they want you to know also, you know, you're missing the trick. You're missing it. And these are the sort of things that I'm sort of identifying in terms of what we're faced with as a people, the kind of Afrophobia. All right, let me run 2 minutes. These are the negative statements that I've picked up. I'll just put a whole line of some negative statements in terms of activists, campaigners, and what we receive from people. I feel saddened, right? That was from an activist, right? A person going out campaigning, got some rejection, and felt saddened. You know, that's a serious thing. You know, when you're going out to help people, and you know you're left feeling that way. Yeah. So we have to prepare people and keep reminding people. I cannot take this rejection by black people. Right? This is us. Yeah. We are not going to get reparations. That's what we hear. Yeah. Then now listen. Do you really think we're going to get reparations? What is reparations? We're only going to get reparations when the throne is restored. Why are we begging? What's the easy? Positive statements. Keep up the good work. I'm glad to do just a little bit. Where can I learn more? How else can I support? This is an important course. I hope you get all the signatures. What is the Ma'angamizi? Some different statements I've put down, you know. Is this for black people only? It's a good question. At the same time. How many signatures have you got so far? Some people say it in a stabbing way, some people say it because they're really interested. What is the petition number so far? White people don't care. Black people can't work together. They're never going to give us reparation. Babylon, they only listen when you bring war to them, or anarchy. And I'm just saying that we are dealing with a global healing, aren't we? So those measures, those things are what I want to keep people away from. I wouldn't like to say that we're going out there pushing them out easy, and we're saying that we're bringing, you know, war to people, because it's not about that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, my brother. Brother Kofi, please come forward. Hold us spellbound. I won't bother to introduce Brother Kofi. We all know who he is, and there's a time issue with him.
I'll say everything has been said, so really there should be very little I have to say, but sometimes when I say that, I end up. But I would like to contribute to this discussion by highlighting 3 main points about the march. I might not be able to do justice to all these points in terms of elaborating on them, but this is really what I would like to contribute. First of all, the fact that the march is a street column of the international social movement for African reparations linked to the People's Reparations International Movement. So the first point I want to highlight. The second point I hope I'll highlight is that the march is a reparatory justice activity of Pan-African internationalist freedom fighting. And then the third point is the reparations march is hopefully moving our community towards learning urban guerrilla street fighting in the liberation strategy and tactics of Pan-African revolutionary change making. And in this, I would like to relate it to Walter Rodney's concepts of the guerrilla intellectual operating in establishments, educational institutions. These are the 3 points, hopefully, I'd like to highlight. First of all, the march as a street column of the ice mine print. The work towards African reparations has been going on, as has been explained, for centuries. It's an intergenerational fight. It started with the first attempt to capture an African on the soil of Africa when that person, even in terms of running away, was an indication that I like my freedom and appreciate and I value my freedom, and you wouldn't take me into captivity. And those who ended up being caught immediately fought by demanding to be free, that is to reclaim their freedom. So that disrepair of trying to take a free people, a sovereign people, into captivity and the resistance to it, to regain that freedom, that is precisely where our reparations struggles started from. Right? And so we need to be very, very clear about that. And that is why the point that has been made earlier is that when individuals can sit and say, for reparations, I want this, I want that. It is important to understand that you individually have absolutely no right. If you're talking about African reparations, you as an individual have absolutely no right to reduce it to only what you want. Because it is about what our families over long periods of time want. It's about what our communities over long periods of time want. It is about what we as a global whole of African people want. It is actually not about you. It's a sacred people's cause for centuries. And in a true Sankofa way, it is also about what unborn generations of our people must have. And if you betray us now, in terms of your narrow, selfish, individualistic myopia, you have to answer not just for generations before and the generations of today, but the generations to come. They will certainly come and they will deal with you.
Yeah.
So that has to be very, very clear to us. Secondly,
Very true, sir.
as a street column of a movement that does not live for only that very particular first day of August when we march, it should be about bringing into that march every instance of work that we've been doing in a wide diversity of ways to show to each other, literally to account to each other, and to do it so openly, transparently, that we can take each other seriously. Because there are people who think that reparation is something that I want it, but I'll be somewhere, and others have to work for it, and if it happens, then I can be a beneficiary. No, that is the day that we try to hold each other to account and say, this is what I'm, and in public, in very, very public space, on the streets, this is what I have been doing, this is what this other person has been doing, and let the whole world see us in the diversity, but also unity of our continuous work for reparative justice. It is to do this in such a way that we can stand tall and be worthy of those who came before us, be worthy of our global community of African people of today, and be worthy of those who will come tomorrow. Yes. Because in the same way that today You can look, and it's very interesting, you can look at the images of those, many of them gone, who were involved in the resistance to chattel enslavement, in resistance to colonial enslavement. The images are there. And we should be asking, as people will ask in the future when they see these images become huge historical documents, where were you in the line of march? Where were you in the line of march? You know, why some adults, parents, can't talk to their children about the resistance our people have, waged maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago, because they were nowhere near it. Nowhere near it. And instead of admitting the shame, they pretend that it doesn't matter. Okay? And some years to come, people will look at these images of the march and ask, where was my father? Where was my grandfather? Where was my mother? Where was my grandmother? And documentation is becoming more sophisticated these days. So that's one.
Right.
Also, for this reason, we need to know what to bring. It's an opportunity to bring as many things as possible. Every aspect of our lives, everything we do on an everyday basis can be African reparations work in terms of personal and community self-repairs. But we have to be very, very precise about this, because certain mistakes get made about when we start talking about the damage to ourselves, the harms being done to us. What is this Holocaust that we talk about as the Bangamisi? But more importantly, how do we repair? It is my view, shared within PACO, that not every attempt to tackle the injustices and the injuries to us qualifies as reparatory justice work for us. Why? Because the harm done to us is harm done to African people. And that harm continues today to rob us of our Africanness. Up to today, as Nana Nketia V, one of the leading figures in the Global African Family Reunion International Council, a prominent chief in Ghana, said, to even just be African is to invite death onto yourself.
Could you repeat that, please?
Yes, please. Yes, thank you.
To even just want to be African is to invite death onto yourself.
I endorse that.
In today's world, in today's world, not yesterday, in today's world. Because being African is seen as a threat to the way the world has been organized by white supremacy.
Yeah.
So, if we want to repair ourselves in any way, if you are of African ancestry, and you want to repair yourself in any way other than what will bring you back to your Africanness, that cannot be African repair. So there are many people trying to repair themselves to be more Black British, to be Afropian. You know, this whole Windrush thing was taken in another whole direction, right? Where we have to gloat and jump and dance because we have been accepted as British. The challenge is this. The Windrush didn't start with that ship that brought it.
That's true.
Before that ship took people from somewhere, another ship or ships took them from somewhere else.
Yes, most definitely.
So how do you forget that?
Yeah.
Right? So if they are going to, redress the injustice of just that episode of Windrush,
Fallacy.
it should have started from somewhere else. And that start ought to be that one, restore to us all that you've taken away from us since you took us from Africa. And we have a right to be in this space because we built it. Almost everything here belongs to us. You cannot tear us away from this place or make Britishness a condition for us to claim to be here with what you've taken from us. Any other approach is actually playing into the dirty, dangerous game of the British white establishment and injures us. Because the harm done to the people who claim the Windrush Reparations are claiming harm done to African people fundamentally. And if you cannot redress those harms on the basis of your Africanness, you are being a coward. A traitor to many generations of people living in your own family. Right? Who made it possible to you even breathe today. Right? So let's be very clear. That is why, whether we are dealing with mental health, we're dealing with education, we're dealing with governance issues, we're dealing with if it is not to restore us to African dignity, African consciousness, respect for us as African people, it cannot be African reparations. It cannot be reparative to us as a people. So what we bring onto this march ought to be what points clearly in the direction of our determination to restore our Africanness to the highest pitch of its dignity. So that is the main point I want to make about point one. The second point, the march as a reparation justice activity of Pan-African international freedom fighting is critical in the sense that the dominant narrative today is that as African people, we have no freedom fight left to fight. And we accept it, right? So we are busy celebrating our presence in Britain and elsewhere in the world, as just like we want to pretend that we're just like everybody else.
Hey.
Oh, we are still an enslaved people. If you're an African anywhere in this world, you do not have the same status as Europeans, as Asians, and many others. You don't have this. You can fool yourself. They can invite you into their company and for a while decorate you with these OBEs and MPs or whatever, right? You can wine and dine with them, and maybe some distant person may be married into whichever family you're talking about, right? It doesn't change your status in this world. It doesn't. Because whatever you think you have, they have created it for you.
Yes.
And tomorrow, if they want, they will take away from you.
Yes.
You have no power to retain and defend what they have given you.
Yes.
So what is the difference of those who they took from the fields and put in the house? Right? And you stayed in the house of massa so long as you behaved. What is the difference? What is the difference? Okay, the vast majority of African people in this world need no lesson about freedom fighting. Because the reality of their lives compels them to fight. Right? Today, the vast majority of Africans in this country, even to put food on the table, to maintain sanity, is real battle for survival. What about the vast majority of peoples on the continent of Africa, in the Caribbean, in the so-called Americas, in Asia, everywhere else? They're still catching the Holocaust of humanism. And the only reason why they survive on a daily basis is how much fight they put up for that survival. Right? So they are clear that they have to fight to survive. The people who are deluding themselves that they are no longer in any situation of fighting are those who have been co-opted. But even then, they do as much as possible to remain there because they know they disobey master and they are out there. They will be thrown back into the mass of the people, into abject poverty. So that freedom fighting continues. And what the march is seeking to do, and increasingly is beginning to do this, is to connect with those movements and organizations that are trying to keep African freedom fighting alive. All over the globe. We don't march under the Haiti flag for nothing. Because Haiti continues for centuries to be at the forefront of global African resistance. And only recently we heard them loud and clear. So when we carry that banner up front and march, if I only say that, if people were to understand what the Haitian Revolution means, particularly those who were at least receiving in terms of white power in Britain, in France, in Germany, Spain. If you know what terror that flag sows in them, but as much will give it a lot more respect and give a lot more respect to the 1st August march. Okay. But that is the signal to the world that even if some of us have been co-opted and they've sold out and they're living the life, there are those of us who know the fight continues and we're taking that fight and expressing it on the streets of London. All our fighting contingents all over the world, those of us who come to London on the 1st day of August in that march, we will display the banners of resistance on that march. And because I have very little time left, virtually I've run out of time, I will leave it there. The third one, which might frighten some people. The Reparations March is trying to move our communities towards urban guerrilla street fighting in the racial structure tactics of Pan-African revolutionary change. Precisely because of what I've said before, that at least so for some of us, 1st August March is an opportunity to show again the banners of our contingents of resistance throughout the African world who refuse to accept and live the lie that we are now free. We have to take seriously this as an opportunity to learn certain forms of fighting that are bound to come. You see, there is a way in which even those who reduce African reparations to just financial compensation, there's a way in which they delude themselves into stupidity that is difficult to comprehend. Do you think that there is any government, in any European government anywhere in the world, or any government controlled by white supremacist power anywhere in the world that is going to get up, whether here in Britain or in France or in Portugal or Spain or the United States of America, and say they are taking money, huge amounts of money, from their national treasury, right? I mean, somebody has woken up one day, maybe, son, that one who sleeps by whatever, has woken up one day and said, okay, maybe it's true, we owe these people something. So let's take some money, it will not be small money, and share it amongst these Africans who've been making us. And you think this country, or whichever country it happens, the establishment there is just going to clap for that and say, okay, go ahead and give it to them.
It will never happen.
There will be that, whoever, if it's a government, it won't survive the next day. It will not survive the next day. What they've done to Jerome Corbyn, still doing to him now, will be actually an ice cream party compared to what they will do to whoever. If things remain the same. Okay?
Can I just say something, sir? Just think of Black Wall Street in America.
Yes, yes.
Just think of that.
There are many historical examples where we even did it ourselves, right? But they came, bent it down, right? Why do you think they did the carnage they have to do in Libya, right? In Syria, in Iraq. No non-European people have a right, even if he is following their capitalist footsteps, to raise anything without the permission of white power or that challenges white power. So, it just won't happen. It's never going to happen. Where, somebody is just going to wake up in one of these governments one day and say that this amount of money, I'm going to share it amongst Africans because we've just woken up to say, we wrong them. Okay? So, it will have to be huge fighting. When we say that identify and shut down Mangamese crimes, and first and foremost, on the continent of Africa, in the Caribbean, elsewhere. Because that is targeting where their power comes from. The wealth with which they build their power to continue enslaving and brutalizing us comes today still from us, from our homeland. Imagine if throughout Africa people rose up one day and said, no more export of gold, diamonds, bauxite, food or whatever from Africa anywhere for 1 week. Will Europe survive?
Never.
We need to do it.
Right? So that is what we are talking about. But when that happens, and the commotion starts here, we should have been in organized readiness to move ourselves also into action. Because if we didn't, we will see their planes fly out and start the worst ever carnage in history on our people. That's possible. In the 60s and 70s, they dropped how many, napalm bombs on Vietnam. Today they are more sophisticated poisoners. So if we took up like that, and we're not organized to fight here in the streets, in defense of who they don't, the weapons of death don't live here in the first place. What the manganese so far we are talking about, what will come will be something else. So preparing ourselves to fight. And if you know how to fight, you fight street by street, road by road, every square inch by square inch. That's how you fight to win. And so when we go out there and we walk these streets, because when they agree that we can only walk, march on certain routes, they know why. They know why. But we have to learn also to fight. And lastly, this is also connected to the importance of allies. And I want to end on this note, because there is a lot of debate about allies, why are we trying to engage non-Africans, what? Please. Let's be clear about history. The only reason they were able to move from here and do what they've done in Africa and versions of it in Asia and elsewhere, Caribbean and elsewhere, is because they have tried it out on their own. They have tried certain versions on their own. Right? There is still a lot of hurts in Europe amongst different classes of people, different sections of people. Even the battles between the Irish and the Scottish and the English, has a lot to do with that history. You see, you don't have to read the art of war to know that when you know you are going to face an enemy one day, before that eventual confrontation, you try to win whoever you can from their armies, paralyze those you can, right? So that the number you finally confront is less. Read the history of the Haitian Revolution, you see how people mastered and practiced that. To the point that the desertions onto the side of African fighters and those who refused to face them in combat was significant. It was contribution to their victory. That is what we are talking about in terms of allies. And we have to recognize that this is a class-ridden society with not just class, but also national contradictions and all other kinds of issues. We have to master these and use them to our benefit. Because at the end of the day, the people they also misuse for this carnage that we can talk about as the manganese, many of them who shifted onto our side in the various phases